Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, any weekend plans?
Well, good morning, Eric. It's good to see you again. I think you and I will see much of each other in the next month.
Yeah.
Our
Hopefully it's not
weekend
too much
plans?
for everybody, but
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, we don't force them to watch or listen to us, but there will be plenty to dissect and to deconstruct and to analyze. And so, yeah, the rumor, the least kept secret in Ottawa, campaign will start this Sunday with a vote, election day on April 28th. So this is a short 5-week campaign. Eric, so are you ready for no, this is our playoffs for me, right? For us, right? So
yeah.
are you ready for this?
I am. And you're right, it does seem like it could be April 28th. We saw some reporting as of this morning. We're recording on Thursday morning. The Globe was saying it was April 28th.
Yep.
Some other places were saying or May 5th, which would make for a 6-week campaign rather than a 5-week campaign. So we'll see. I think either way I win the over-under, which...
You do. That's right. For completely different reasons than we expected.
Yes, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really funny because we figured, okay, prorogation ends on March 24th, then throne speech, then the NDP takes the government down. We are in a completely different universe. For those who don't know what we're talking about, at Christmas we had an over-under for election day, and I didn't go under over, I said May 12th, and I missed. So
You're going to be
I
off
was
by a
close,
week.
but-
Yeah, I know. It's pretty shameful. But, we all make mistakes. What are you going to do? All right. So we're both giddy because this election is about to get going. And we're already starting to feel the strain of it. And we're gonna power through. And we've got quite a bit to talk about. There's been a lot of polls that have been published in the last week. And they are... Pretty remarkable, pretty insane to have seeing some of these numbers. We're gonna talk about some of them individually, but I think the headline numbers were the 3 polls that were put out by Ipsos, by Leger, and by the Angus Reid Institute. They all had the Liberals at 42%.
Yeah.
And they all had the Conservatives between 36 and 39%, and the NDP between 9 and 10%.
Wow.
To see these 3 polling firms, which are, some of the older ones in Canada, have good track records in federal elections, to all have the Liberals at 42%, a level we have not seen them since the pandemic, and maybe the months after Justin Trudeau first won in 2015. At this point, it's very real, right? There's no more wondering, are the Liberals ahead? Are they surging forward? It's pretty obvious that they are in the front runner position as this election begins.
Which is insane, right? Because we spoke, you and I, every week, and we had, the surge is on, the surge is off, but the gap kept narrowing. And we were wondering at which point the Liberals would hit the ceiling. I had the feeling that it would be around the 30% mark, that the Conservatives and Liberals could be like a 38-30 or something. But it just kept going, and I'm not sure if the numbers, of course, are volatile. There's nothing solid about this lead. But you take it, for instance, the Leger poll, 42% for the Liberals, leading by a huge margin in Atlantic Canada, leading by 12 points in Quebec over the Bloc Québécois, leading in Ontario, doing very well in BC. This is a recipe not only for a Liberal win, Eric, but a Liberal majority.
Yeah.
And I mean, we are running out of epithets to when to describe these numbers. And we will get into our projections, of course, our projections of the day and of the week. It's just that there's some discomfort on my end. I don't know how you feel about this, but Liberals at 42... there's going to be some goofy projections coming out because we haven't seen this. In the Trudeau era, okay, so there was 2015, big win. But 2019 and 2021, I think these elections were pretty much, the projections at least, Eric, were predictable. Like the trends followed what we expected. There were not huge surprises. There's some seats that will be very strange with these numbers.
Yeah, because especially out west,
Yeah.
in Alberta, you start to see some of these numbers, and the Conservatives being somewhere around maybe 55 and the Liberals at 25. Both of us have in our aggregate the Conservatives leading by about 27, 28 points in Alberta. You have to project like 4, 6, maybe 8 seats for the Liberals in Alberta, and it starts to boggle the mind a little bit that, okay, they're winning 3 or 4 in Edmonton, they're winning 2 or 3 or 4 in Calgary. You go over to British Columbia, where, again, both of us have, in our average, just a 5-point lead for the Conservatives. That's pretty much a 50-50 split in terms of seats in British Columbia, where you have the Liberals winning 15, 20 seats. It starts to get more difficult to find those kinds of seats on the map, but they kind of have to happen. If the Liberals are actually at that level of support, they are going to win some seats that kind of feel surprising, that they, we wouldn't have even thought they had a shot at just a couple of months ago. So I agree with you that when these kinds of numbers happen, when you see this kind of change, it does make me nervous when you get down to that seat map. But I do still believe very, very firmly in the theory behind the kind of projections that both of us do. And I don't know about you, but there's been a few elections in my now getting, longer career.
You're a veteran, yep.
That I didn't even believe my own numbers. And then on election day, like, okay. Yeah, the NDP did win 50 plus seats in Alberta in 2015. You do get those kinds of results that are very shocking. And you hear from people, I often hear it from, journalists that are local journalists and not really believing that it could be possible that a party could win a seat that, they haven't held for this long. Sometimes the numbers don't lie and things just kind of happen. And I have a feeling if these numbers hold, that we're going to have that kind of conversation the day after the election.
Listen, you talked about British Columbia. I want to talk about Quebec eventually, but while we're on British Columbia, in the last election in 2021, the NDP won 13 seats in British Columbia with 29% of the vote. And now in consecutive léger polls, the NDP was in British Columbia. The NDP was at 11 and 13%, basically shedding more than half their support, mostly to the Liberals, because I see here, Poilievre Conservatives in BC in the high 30s and low 40s, pretty much where they were in the last election. So we have a transfer of voters from the NDP to the Liberals in British Columbia. And so that means that a lot of seats in the Vancouver area that have been orange for a while should be red. Yeah. But then you look at this like, oh my God, really? Okay, Vancouver East, remains orange, you would think. But some of these seats were won by big margins. And I don't know. There's some discomfort. And we're looking at an election that will completely redraw the map and redistribute voters that will learn a lot from this. But I kind of fear that we're going to be surprised. Last election, Eric, in 2021, there was one seat out of 178 that I labeled safe and went the wrong way. One out of almost 200 seats. I'm afraid that there's going to be 5-10 seats that we're not even looking that could be a big surprise with these numbers. But
well, I think the NDP is going to be a bit of an underrated story in this if they continue to have these kinds of numbers. Because, again, we had a 9% in Léger and a 9% in the Angus Reid Institute. Now, I should point out there have been a couple other polls that haven't been as bad for the NDP. Nanos in their month-long tracker still has them at 16. The Abacus poll had him at 15. And we should mention as well that the Abacus poll still had a Conservative lead of 4 points, but we'll see if they're going to catch up when they do their next set of polling. Right now, it does seem like the consensus is much more towards a Liberal lead of somewhere between 5-6 points than it is a Conservative lead of a few points like we've seen in a handful of polls. But just what you just said there about British Columbia. So a lot of people, and we're going to hear it from a lot of New Democrats, that our incumbents hold on. Look, you all said that we were going to lose so many seats in Ontario, and look how many we held on to. But in Ontario, the NDP went from 24% to just under 19,
19,
right?
Yeah.
if they go from 29% in a place like British Columbia to 15 or 12, once you get to the point where you're losing half your vote, your incumbents are going to be in a lot of danger, no matter how popular they are. The NDP has experience of this on the other side. 2011 in Quebec. A lot of, I remember also hearing, if you, I don't know how closely you were following that election, but I remember hearing, you remember Bernard Bigras? You remember
Of course,
him?
Yeah.
He was, a couple days before the election, he was saying how the Bloc has its strong incumbents, we have the resources on the ground, you know, we're not going to lose. They lost so many seats to the NDP because the NDP was just riding this wave, and it didn't matter. There's so many ridings I remember seeing. You know, the Bloc had spent $40,000-$50,000 in the riding, and the NDP had spent 12, literally 12.
That's two coffee. Yeah. 2 coffees.
So, I mean, if we do see these kinds of swings, we are going to see those kinds of surprises, and that's what's going to make it so fascinating. Again, if these numbers hold, which we don't know what's going to happen. Things have changed so much in the last couple of weeks. What are they going to do in the next 5?
They could change again. This is volatile. As I said before, this is very soft support that the Liberals are enjoying. It could solidify, but, you know, again, Mark Carney, if he has a bad campaign, thing is, I don't remember like somebody having a really bad campaign, uninspiring, then winning. I mean, maybe François Legault in 2022, that was not a great campaign, but he was leading by so much and he had the best machines, and his opponents were not that great either. But usually when you run a bad campaign, you lose, right? Yeah. So we'll see how it goes. There's going to be 5 quick weeks. It's going to be intense. But okay, so you just mentioned Quebec. I want to talk about this for a second, if I may, Eric, because okay, Léger in the latest federal poll, not Quebec only, federal poll, has the Liberals at 40% in Quebec and the Bloc at 24%. And those numbers are kind of close to what the hypothetical polls that we had before Mr. Carney became the Liberal leader. So it seems that the honeymoon is real, right? The Carney bump is real. Do you remember, you just mentioned 2011. Do you remember the share of the vote the Bloc got in Quebec in 2011?
Yeah, it was like 24%.
Yeah, it was 23%. Okay. And so I think for the Bloc Québécois, winning 25 seats or winning 9 seats, the margin is not that big. If the Bloc goes below 25%, watch out, because all these dominoes could fall. Now, again, I'm not saying that it will happen, but this should be a big worry for the Bloc Québécois. And if those numbers hold, again in Quebec, we will have Liberal seats in places we did not expect. And in our projection, in our national projection, like if the Liberals outperform in Quebec, this is just house money. This is bonus money for the Liberals. And, you know, if let's say they win 45 seats in Quebec, that looks like a majority for the Liberals. Sure. So, and Ontario, you want to mention Ontario? So I see Léger here, 44% Liberal, 42% Conservative. What do you have in Ontario right now, Eric?
Yeah, we both have the Liberals in our aggregates now leading in Ontario by a couple points. Yep. That is a big shift. So it did seem like Ontario was taking a little bit longer to follow along the trends as other areas, which might have been a bit of a hangover from the Ontario provincial election. But clearly it does seem like now it's a neck-and-neck race in Ontario. But a neck-and-neck race is, as it is nationally, that's a good race for the Liberals, right? Because then you get a place where the Liberals can win 70 seats to the Conservatives 50, because the Conservatives, again, run up the numbers in rural Ontario, and the Liberals would be in a better position to win a lot of seats in the GTA by 5 or 10 points, right? Yeah. This is why the Liberals are now in that good position to potentially win a majority, because nationally the Conservatives run up the numbers in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and then within a lot of these regions they run up the numbers in rural areas, in BC, in Ontario, less so elsewhere. But you do get we are looking again at a kind of map that looks a bit like 2015. With a weaker NDP. And, you know, you mentioned, you talked about the Bloc. The only majority governments we've had since the merger of the right
That's right.
was in 2011 when the Bloc won 4 seats, and in 2015 when the Bloc won 10 seats. So if we see the Bloc dropping down, and we see the NDP dropping down, we're probably heading towards a majority government. It's unlikely that you would get the Liberals and the Conservatives both winning 160 seats, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could happen, but it's not what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
Right? The Conservatives would have to do as well in BC as they were back in January, and would have to at least be closer to the Liberals in Atlantic Canada. Because right now, okay, so in 2021, the Liberals won 24 of 32 seats in Atlantic Canada. And it had gone down, I think it was 28 in 2019. And of course, in 2015, Justin Trudeau swept the Atlantic Canada, 32 out of 32. Right now, I have Liberals making gains in Atlantic Canada. Not only just playing defense and playing the trap and securing what they already have, I have them making gains. The Conservatives do not have a path to a majority. If they, well, we know they're not doing that well in Quebec. They could pick up a few seats, but not a great harvest. If they don't make gains in Atlantic Canada and don't do that well in Ontario, there's not enough seats in the West for them to take all and reach 172. The math is just not there. So it's true that the Conservatives don't need a surge in Quebec and really did not need to dominate Atlantic Canada. It's because they were leading by 20 or 25 points in Ontario. Now that's gone. So, question for you, Eric, because we're going to stick to the numbers here, but I was asked this question. Are the Liberals surging, or are the Conservatives choking? Or a little bit of both? What will you say?
It's always a little bit of both. Any answer is always a little bit of both. It makes you sound very wise and even-handed. But I do think it is that because the Liberals are surging because they're getting support from the NDP. They're getting support from the Bloc, maybe even the Greens. There's not much there, but they're getting some of that. And they're getting some from the Conservatives. So that is the Liberals drawing support towards them. But the fact that the Conservatives are losing support suggests that they're also playing a role in this, right? And so it's the combination of those two things. And it's also what I think makes this momentum that Carney has, it makes it a little bit more solid because it's not just a transference of one set of voters over to the Liberals and so easy to transfer them back, right?
Yeah.
Because the people who are went from the Bloc to the Liberals are not going to go back to the Bloc for the same reasons that people would go back to the Conservatives or go back to the NDP. Yeah. So you could kind of see in a scenario where, I don't know, Poilievre does something really good during the campaign, and he steals back a little bit of the Liberals supporters that they've lost to the last little while, but the Liberals still hold on to the NDP and Bloc gains. You could see a thing where the NDP picks up support back from the progressive wing, but the Conservatives don't get their support back. So the Liberals have a few kind of cushions. They also have the problem that if things go badly for them, they could start leaking from everywhere. That's also, there's just everything. It's just so volatile that you do have to think that if the Liberals can gain 20 points in a couple months, they can lose 10 in 5 weeks.
100%. And I really insist on this. So many journalists and academics reach to me for questions like, could the Liberals lose this? It's like, yeah, of course they could. This is new support. This is, oh, look at this new shiny leader. And of course we have a bully president south of the border. Well, the thing is about this, the bully president, it's also how both parties reacted to Trump. In January, the first reaction of Pierre Poilievre was, oh, Trump is attacking us because we're weak. It's Trudeau's fault. And I think that really, really hurt him early on in this, after Trump's inauguration, because Canadians didn't buy it, or many Canadians didn't buy it at least,
or didn't want to hear it.
But they could also revert back. What do you make of Trump saying to was it Fox News that he would rather deal with a liberal government in Canada? Did you see that coming?
Yes, I saw it. I mean, Whatever
What do you
Trump
think of
says, there's always some sort of motive and ulterior thing to it, and everything he says is about as transparent as. I could make lots of jokes,
Mud?
but I won't make a joke there. But he's not exactly very subtle. So, like, I don't think you can ever take anything that he's saying at face value.
Of course not.
So, what does it mean? I don't know. I'm sure some people told him in his ears that every time that he's talking about Canada, it's hurting the Conservatives, and so he thinks that if he says something, it might help them, or maybe he doesn't like Poilievre because he should be on his side and didn't like him. Like, honestly, I don't care.
Okay, I'll say this.
That'll be my response.
That's a good response. And I'll say this, okay? Again, Trump says anything all the time. And
Yes.
But if in that interview, Trump had said, oh, I would much rather deal with a conservative government in Canada, don't doubt for a second that the NDP and the Liberals would have jumped on this, right?
Yes, of course.
So it's fair game, but who cares what he says? He says anything all the time. So...
And he will continue to. It'll be the theme of the campaign.
No doubt.
And, you said it's how the parties react to it. They're going to have to keep doing that every single day.
Yeah.
Right? And
It's the
what are
ballot
they going to
question.
say? What are they going to do?
Yep.
It's going to be this wild card that you can't, like, you know how parties, they have this big calendar and they have, like, their weeks planned out, and this will be when this announcement, we're going to go here, we're going to do this. Every single day, they're going to have to look to see what Trump tweeted or social, whatever the hell it is now, and then react to it. So that's why I think this campaign could be pretty crazy. It's going to be a wild ride, no matter what happens.
Eric, I think since we're at the starting line of this campaign, we should talk about our projections. So I want to ask you what you still run the CBC poll tracker, and good for you. Well done. I like to read on it. It's really good as usual. So what does your poll tracker say right now?
And I think during the campaign we're going to lean a little bit more heavily on our projections because every day there's probably going to be 3, 4, 5 polls out.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're not going to recite every single number that comes out. But right now I have the Liberals leading a little bit in the polls because it's still taking into account some of the older polls. So that is going to start getting kind of weeded out as we get into the campaign. But have a small lead for the Liberals. But in terms of the seats, I have 176 Liberal MPs, so just over the threshold for majority government. 133 for the Conservatives, so a few gains, as you said, but not a huge amount. 26 for the Bloc, 7 NDP, 1 Green. And the odds that I have now, 53% Liberal majority, 24% Liberal minority. So three out of 4 chances that the Liberals would win the most seats if an election were held today. What do you got?
Hang on, I want to dissect this. Your 1 Green would be Kitchener Center, right?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, so you have Miss May as an underdog in her seat on Vancouver Island, right?
Yeah, I do believe I'd have to check, but I think it's still like a toss-up kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
But her support in the last election wasn't that high.
No, yeah.
So with the Greens seemingly not doing well in BC, some of the polls have them in the low single digits. That's a seat that would flip, and I think it would flip probably to the Conservatives based on the profile of the riding.
Yeah, the Liberals on Vancouver Island. I mean the Liberals did win Victoria, right? But outside of this, let's go from the bottom up. So the NDP at 7. I'm guessing none in Atlantic Canada.
No.
Do you still have 1 in Quebec? Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie?
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, so maybe 2 or 3 in Ontario? Windsor, Hamilton?
I believe, so I think my 7 are Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie, Hamilton Centre, Windsor West, London Fanshawe.
Oh, London, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Edmonton Strathcona in Alberta, Vancouver East, and the 7th, I'm not sure what the 7th is. It's probably
Nunavut, maybe? Nunavut?
Yeah, it might be Nunavut, or it might be one of the ones in Manitoba. I'd have to check again.
Because Winnipeg Center, Miss Gazal, I think her name is.
Gazan, yeah.
Yes, Gazan. Sorry, Gazal is Ruba Gazal. That's why we'll get to that. But so there's the 2 seats that the NDP held. Well, two seats of the NDP in Manitoba were won by fair margin. Nikki Ashton in the north and Madame Gazan in Winnipeg centers. It's just that the numbers for the NDP have been so bad in the prairies.
Yeah.
that you wonder. I mean, is it possible? I think Winnipeg Center should be a bit safer than the one in the north. But okay, that's interesting. The Bloc Québécois at 26. I think I'm close to this as well. I think I have 25. That means that the Bloc makes no gains. I'm guessing that you have them losing the seats in Quebec City and Trois-Rivières, and as well that La Salle-et-Mare Verdun one. That's not going Bloc again, right?
No.
Okay.
That's going to be high on the list. I mean, the Liberals are going to get that vote back that they lost, which was a Trudeau go away vote, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the same way as Toronto Centre, right? They lost the Liberals. Not Toronto Centre, sorry, Toronto St. Paul's. Yes. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so here's what I have. I updated this morning, so this is brand new, and it's close to yours. I have the Liberals at 178. So clearly, with your 176, you are, underestimating
for the Conservatives, right?
The Conservatives at 130 on average, of course. It's a bell curve. Bloc Québécois at 25. I have the NDP at 8 seats, so similar to yours. I still have the Greens at 2, but their confidence ranges from 1 to 3. I think, considering also the provincial numbers, Kitchener Centre, I think, should be considered a pretty good Green seat, the best in the country. And if I look at the regionals, I have the Liberals doing really well in Atlantic Canada, unsurprisingly. I have the Liberals at 39 seats in Quebec. I just noticed. I thought it was more like 36. 39 seats in Quebec. That's a bit uncomfortable.
They won 40 in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true. They won 40 with 36% of the vote in 2015. And one of them, I remember, was Laurentide Labelle, a Liberal seat in the Laurentians, which doesn't happen, right? They lost it, obviously, in the next election. I have 78 seats in Ontario for the Liberals, which is strange because it's exactly the number they had in 2021. We're back to this. I checked my projection, Eric. In early January, I had 100 seats for the Conservatives in Ontario alone. Wow. And now 40. So, and you mentioned Alberta. How many Liberal seats do you have in Alberta right now?
I don't know offhand. I should have the numbers directly in front of me, but I don't.
Okay, I'll tell you. I have 5.
Okay.
But the confidence range goes from 1 to 9. The Angus Reid Institute and the Liberal and Léger both had the Liberals at 31% in Alberta. Now, we know it's a small sample, although the Angus Reid Institute was not that small. But 31% in Alberta, just to remind our readers and watchers, Eric, do you remember the share of the vote for the Liberals in Alberta last time around?
Like 11 or something?
I was 15.
15, okay.
So if they double their vote, and you kind of imagine that the Liberals have not really doubled their vote in Fort McMurray or something, or Foothills. There's
going from
now
6
there's
to
16.
12 isn't that hard.
But it's not, exactly. As you said, we could have 3-4 seats in Edmonton, maybe 5. You could have 2-3 seats in Calgary. And maybe the PM could run there, right? I think there's a stronger case right now for Mr. Carney to go in Edmonton.
We might hear something by today because he is, I believe, in Edmonton.
He is,
and so by the time you're listening or watching this, the news might already be out or something like that. But the reporting as of the morning was that he was going to be in Edmonton. Amarjeet Sohi was going to run for the Liberals. And I imagine it would be in Edmonton Southeast, which used to be his riding, and would have been the riding I would have suggested for Mark Carney if he wanted to run. So maybe we'll have a bit more clarity of where he's going to run.
That's interesting.
We'll see. But Alberta, we've seen in the past that the polls often underestimate Conservative support in Alberta, but it's not so much something that happens in the cities.
No.
It's something that happens in the rural areas where it doesn't really have an impact on the seat count. So,
absolutely.
With these kinds of numbers, you have to have results like that, right?
Yeah.
You can't be at 30% in Alberta and you only still win 1 seat. It is. And then what do you got in BC?
I was just pulling this up. So BC, I have 23 seats for the Conservatives, and 22 seats for the Conservatives and 19 for the Liberals. One Green, one NDP. One NDP in BC. So, and that seat, I guess you can guess it. It's
East.
Vancouver East. Yeah.
It's not Burnaby Central.
No, it's not. It's not. In fact, I have the NDP third in Burnaby Central, which we assume will be where Jagmeet Singh will run.
It'll be really interesting to listen and watch this podcast in 5 weeks to see
or not
how much has changed. Yeah, or it might not be, but I mean, it's always fun to see how things shift. So that's where things stand right now.
Yep, interesting.
It's changed. It's changing on a day to week to, like, just this. I updated my poll tracker yesterday, and the Liberals took the lead in the vote, and the day before that they took the lead in the seats. So it's been a huge shift, and whenever you see these huge shifts, it always makes me nervous about, are these things actually real? Because you know that if the Conservatives, let's say the Conservatives have a great campaign, okay?
Yeah.
And they earn a majority government and turn things around, and they win on April 28th, May 5th. You do know some people will say, you said the Liberals were going to win a majority. We'll see what the campaign actually does. The campaigns still matter, and it's going to have. I think this one's going to. Actually, I wonder if this one's going to matter. I wonder if it's all going to be about whatever happens south of the border, and whatever the parties do up here won't have an impact. But
yeah, well, the thing is, Trump's threat of tariffs. It's been pushed back many times. It was early February, then it was early March. Now I think it's April 2nd. We don't know whether it's going to happen. You would think at some point, maybe the threat of tariffs is just as bad as tariffs. But if you don't think that Donald Trump will insert himself in the Canadian campaign, I don't know what to tell you. He loves doing this. So it depends on how parties react to it. So we'll get to there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
It's going to be fun. All right, Philip, we actually still had some provincial politics happening over the last
right?
while.
How dare they?
I don't know why they're bothering. So we had 2 by-elections, one in Quebec, one in Manitoba, provincial by-elections. Terrebonne, what happened in Terrebonne?
So Terrebonne was, traditionally has been a pretty good PQ seat in the last 50 years. In 2018, the CAQ won it, and in 2022, won it again by 30 points. And as we expected, the Parti Québécois won by a huge margin, 24 points ahead of the CAQ. Though in itself, it was not a surprise that the PQ would take this back. But I think the margins kind of surprised us. The Liberals, Conservatives, and Québec Solidaire all tanked, all below, all in single digits. So the PQ now has 5 MNAs, and they're looking good in the suburbs of Montreal, and Terrebonne, of course, is a big one to win back. So we'll see where it goes from there, but it kind of confirms the numbers that we had, that the CAQ, which had performed so well in the suburbs of Montreal, in the ring around Montreal, could be in deep, deep trouble. What did you make of Terrebonne, Eric?
Yeah, 34-point gain for the PQ, kind of matches where things have been in the polls. So kind of confirms what's happening there. As you mentioned, Quebec Solidaire had a really bad showing. And then we heard news coming out today that Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, who was the co-spokesperson, though he was their premier candidate, he was in the debates last time, will be stepping down as leader or co-leader of Quebec Solidaire, won't be running in the next election. So that's going to be a big change for that party, which has been struggling in the last little while.
Oh, yeah. Since their convention in 2023, nothing has gone right in the polls or in the by-elections. So,
yeah. And then we also had one in Transcona in Winnipeg. This was a provincial by-election. The NDP, this was an NDP seat. Shannon Corbett of the NDP managed to hold it with 64% of the vote. So it was a gain of 6 points for the NDP since the last election. The PCs dropped 7 points. They're at 28%. I mean, not too much to say about this one, aside from the fact that kind of confirms the canoe honeymoon is continuing to continue, and that the NDP is the Manitoba NDP is in a strong place. And this is probably, well, I mean, it is. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The strongest NDP in the country. And I'm curious if the Manitoba New Democrats and Wapkinew are going to lend a hand to some of those federal NDP MPs that are going to be in tough, I think, over the next few weeks.
Do you think that Wapkinew would want to risk that? When everything is going well, you don't have to take risk. I mean, we're talking about a honeymoon, but was he elected in September, right? So we're closing on almost 2 years of honeymoons. At some point, it's not a honeymoon. It's just a really appreciated government. Now, of course, it won't last forever, but that's a long honeymoon for Wapkinew. So yeah, Miss Corbett, a new MLA for Transcona.
All right, we'll end with our number of the week. Mine is just going to be pretty simple. It's going to be that 42. I think that was the number that a lot of people were talking about this week, the 42% that we saw for the Liberals in the Ipsos, the Angus Reid, and the Léger polls. It's higher than the Liberals have gotten since, when was the last time they got 42% in elections? Probably 1993. They got like 43%.
I don't think they got to 42%. It would be the 80s, right? 93?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe they got like 41% in that election. Anyway, 42% would be a huge number for the Liberals, and it just kind of shows how things have changed. And it is the number of the week, because I think it really changed people's perceptions of what this election is going to look like.
I agree. My number of the week, I will go back to that Léger poll. And by the way, the Liberals had 41% in 1993. So you're correct. Almost 42. My number of the week, I go back to that Léger poll, had impressions of the leaders. And we know that Mark Carney is new, so it's normal to see more Canadians not know who he is. Favorable for Mark Carney, 46%. Unfavorable, 28%. So that's a plus, 18. Pierre Poilievre, 39 favorable, 49 unfavorable. That's a minus 10. But my number of the week is minus 21. It is the net rating of Pierre Poilievre among women. We know that the Conservatives are not doing as well among women than men. But compared to this, Mark Carney is a plus 19. So there's a 40-point gap between the two among women. And if women go out to vote in droves, Pierre Poilievre could be in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff to follow. And the rest of the campaign is going to be pretty darn interesting. And because of that, we are going to be accelerating our coverage of it. We're going to have an extra episode now on Monday. So our first one will be on this coming Monday, assuming the election writ is dropped indeed on Sunday, as is reported. So we'll have episodes on Monday, on Thursday. And we are also going to have extra episode for members of the Patreon, which will come out on Saturdays. So it'll be next Saturdays, not the one coming up just in a couple of days. So if you want to get the bonus episode every week, and it is going to be kind of like a normal episode like we're doing right now, you can join us at thenumberspod.ca, and we'll have that out throughout the campaign. And it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. This is a podcast focused on polls, and the polls are going to be pretty interesting, pretty wild, I think, over the next little while. So the place, I'm happy to be doing this with you. So I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun, and there's going to be surprises. It's going to be some calls that we miss, but also calls that we have right. And it's going to be fun also to interact with the members. So I'm looking forward to that, I think.